Okay, back here in the OK Turbo shop. So today working on the Estes Stiletto upscale. So this is where I'm at so far. I did a video on how I cut the fins and then how I laminated the fins. So everything's kind of glued in. I haven't done any fillets or anything yet. I think I'm going to keep the edges just square. That's kind of how they show it in the old pictures of this thing, and the artwork and things like that from Estes back in the day. So I'm probably just going to keep it that way. I may round them off a little bit just so they're not quite so sharp. But everything's glued in. I've got some room there on the motor mount tube so I can add the nozzle. I've made a nozzle out of fiberglass, several layers of fiberglass. Used a aluminum transition cone as kind of a form for that. So that turned out pretty good. I still haven't figured out how I'm going to do motor retention yet. I guess I usually just go with Z-clips because they're inexpensive, but I may actually buy a Aero Pack retainer for that, just kind of keep it simple because it's so far back from the centering ring. You can see where, I put the blind nuts and screws there. I may actually use those to hold the cone on, or the simulated nozzle, whatever you want to call it. So that's where we're at there. Now, one of the big design features of this rocket is this simulated raceway wireway that goes up the length of it. So I need to make that out of something. So I kind of was like looking at it. It's a 4 times upscale, and the piece that made that in the original rocket was an 1/8 by an 1/8 by 12. So that turns out to be 1/2 by 1/2 by 48. So looking through my stashes of wood, I pulled out some of the big pieces here. These are all 4 feet long. But I don't have any 1/2 inch thick ones, so probably what I'm going to do is laminate 2 pieces of this quarter together. So I figured what I'd do, since there's kind of I showed this balsa stripper tool on that last couple of posts, kind of how I was using it to cut these strips of body tube. Makes it real handy, makes a nice neat cut there. But I also on this one, I'm actually going to use it on its intended purpose, to strip some balsa wood. So if I make a couple of strips of these, glue them together, then those can be that conduit tunnel, whatever you want to call it, along the side. And I actually think it's going to add quite a bit of stiffness to this tube. I mean, it certainly should. So I'm going to get everything set up, then I'm going to come back and we're going to use the balsa stripper tool to cut a couple strips of balsa. Okay, balsa stripper tool here. I've had it for years. The way it works, it just screws in and out for the thickness of the strip that you want. So you can do this 2 ways. You can look on a ruler or scale and set it. This is really hard to do with one hand. So that looks like that's about 1/2 inch, because that's what I want. I want 1/2 inch wide. I'll stack the 2/4 inch thick pieces together and it'll make a 1/2 by 1/2 square stick. The easiest thing to do is to here's 2/4 inch thick pieces of balsa wood. You just set it here. So I'll kind of screw it back out. If you want 1/2 inch thick, well, now I know that's 1/2 inch thick. You can see how the blade just goes up against it like that. Run it back. Now you know that's going to be 1/2 inch thick. We can check it here. There is the thickness of your razor. It's a number 11 blade, but yeah, that's 1/2 inch. So there's that. So that piece I've already kind of cut out for something there. Let's use this one. I'm gonna have to go sideways here. Let's see if I can get this set up so we can see. So you guys can see what I'm doing here. I mean, it's really not hard to figure out, but the wood here. There are some knots here. I'm not sure if I want to run into those or not. Let's start with this funny little spot there. Just start here. In the first pass, you just do it very lightly, and you just kind of keep this edge up against the edge of the balsa. You know, so it's like anytime you're cutting balsa wood, it will want to follow the grain. So you're just kind of keeping the steady pressure, not too much. Pull it towards you. And with thick balsa wood, you can't really make the whole cut all at once, because you will for sure make it crooked, because it'll want to follow the grain. Or if it hits, you know, hard spot. Balsa is not that consistent where, I mean, there'll be like hard spots in the wood. And then this next time, well, you might be able to go the rest of the way. So I'm pretty much all the way through now. And setting up the depth of your blade too is, you don't want to go too deep, because you know, it's just barely above the surface of this table. Of course, this is my workbench, so it's, you know, it's got glue blobs and everything else on it. If you go too deep, it'll be digging into that. So it's set up just so it's just barely flush. So at this point now, we ought to be able to just kind of do one of those. So there's one strip, nice and neat cut, and it cuts it, you know, in a thick piece of wood. It's really nice because it cuts it perpendicular. So I mean, if you've noticed when you've cut fins before by hand, sometimes it gets a little crooked where your blade goes, you know, think you got everything perpendicular, but it goes in at an angle. So then we'll just do another one. I mean, this is just riveting. Watching me cut, watching OK Turbo cut a 1/2 inch wide strip of balsa wood. I know. I mean, if you watch these videos, you're not really going for fast-paced action anyway. But I guess the rocket launches, that's kind of cool. Rocket launches are. The building takes patience. Here's our second pass on this one. So there you go. So now I have two pieces that should be able to glue together. Let's see how nice and neat that is. And almost, the grain almost just disappears because it's just such a nice cut. Now I got to decide what kind of glue am I going to use. If I use wooden glue, is that going to be too much moisture and make it want to warp? I don't know. I've got, you know, some good old cement or ambroid cement. I might do that. That tends to work a little better. That's kind of old school. Maybe CA is the way to go. Just, I might do that. I think it's a little crunchy. Let's see if we can tell how straight those pieces are. Yeah, they're kind of already warping up a little bit. Yeah, you can see down here it kind of warped. As you cut that wood, it releases the tension in the fibers, and then whatever internal stresses they were. I may actually try and cut another piece, because that piece right there has got a warp down on the end. I mean, it's only balsa wood. I could bend it in, but why? Yeah. I think I'll just guide it together. It's not pulling that strong. This is not that hard of balsa wood. Anyhow, a lot of blah blah. There you go. Okay, I think I convinced myself I was going to use just thin CA and just wick it in between. That's going to be the easiest way to do this. So, funny story, thin CA. I got finished doing this cone. And I trimmed up some, you know, cut that off with a hacksaw, you know, from the rough. But you can see there's like some spaces there where it was kind of, the resin was kind of made like a pocket. right in here. So I'm sitting here holding this thing. I made like a little cut with the X-Acto knife, and so I'm kind of squirting the thin CA in there to kind of harden up that where the resin didn't get, you know, rather than just redo the whole thing. So I'm holding this thing, thin CA, filling that in. Well, all of a sudden I feel my fingers get hot, and sure enough, I glued myself to this darn thing. And with one hand, of course, it was, you know, 10 o'clock at night. I go grab the can of acetone and I grab an epoxy, but of course the whole time this thing is, I was hoping I didn't have to go to bed with this stupid thing glued to my hand. But so yeah, thin CA, yeah, that's not the first time that's happened. One time I was working on a model airplane, I'm holding it like this and I'm gluing some thin CA to put a piece of plywood or something on there, and same kind of a thing. I could feel it get hot in the palm of my hand. Sure enough, I glued the whole airplane fuselage to my hand. So this, just lay it on the table with some wax paper, and I'm just going to let it wick in. You can actually see a little bit of smoke there. I don't know if you guys can see that or not. Really the first brand of CA that came out, and this was a long time ago. I mean, I was probably in junior high. I mean, we're talking, you know, the early 80s. That's when CA glue, it was just like a revelation. Oh my gosh, look at this glue. The brand name was Hot Stuff, you know, Satellite City Hot Stuff. And if you worked very much with the CA, cyanoacrylate glues, you know that when it cures, it gets hot. And there are times you can actually see like a little puff of smoke, because I think it's actually water vapor come off of it because it gets so hot. So I'm just kind of pinching them, holding them together, letting it wick in. Yeah, those eyes are starting to burn. Fumes coming up off of this. Okay. I'll go back through that some more after that kind of cures. If I can keep from gluing myself to it. That should be a fairly straight piece of wood, 1/2 inch square now. That will be the conduit. Now then I have to figure out, okay, I got this electronics bay. So the electronics bay goes in this guy. How am I going to make this connection here? So here's the electronics bay. Fits just like that, like an electronics bay would. You guys can't even see that, can you? Because of all the glare. Now this conduit's going to be running here. So I'm going to have to do some trickery there. Do I cut it straight or an angle? You know, it might actually be a good place to put a shear pin. I don't know. Have to figure that out. But that's how I'm using the balsa stripper, with a lot of other commentary.